Afternoon, everyone. Okay, so we've got a good number now registered and online, so we will get started. And yeah, say welcome on this lovely sunny day in Suffolk, in particular, to today's webinar as part of our Sizewell C Supply Chain business support program. Obviously, today taking a skills-based approach to help unlock the potential of your workforce. It's one of the series of the business support program webinars we're doing. As always, we cover a multitude of subjects. Very much a lot of the time based on feedback from you, the businesses that we're working with, and also working closely with Sizewell C to identify those areas where businesses can help get ready for what's coming ahead over the next 10 to 12 years on the Sizewell C project. Just as a quick understanding of what we're going to cover today, you'll hear a little bit from me, but in the main, you'll hear from Guy Hazelhurst, skills lead at Sizewell C, who will talk through all of the work that is underway when it comes to addressing the skills need and how, as businesses, we can get involved in that. We will, as always, have ample time for Q&A at the end, and we always encourage lots and lots of questions, lots and lots of comments throughout. Before we finish, let's say by 4 o'clock. If it's a little bit before then and we all get a bit of extra time, then fantastic. Firstly, though, to myself, so my name is Shorey-Mills. I'm the Sizewell C Supply Chain Engagement Director here at the Suffolk Chamber of Commerce. The Chamber of Commerce ourselves, we've been involved on the Sizewell C project now for 13 years. So very much, when you get the excitement of the project finally starting and kicking off, we feel it possibly more than most because we have been there, we've been through it all. To support Suffolk in making sure that should this project go ahead, and it finally now is, that we get the best out of it locally and regionally. Our team are there to support you as the local and regional businesses in the East who want to work on Sizewell. We work very, very closely with Sizewell C, their main contractors, to really identify how to make sure local businesses are working on this project. The purpose of today is very much to help you understand what Sizewell are doing. Certainly as a Chamber of Commerce, we are very keen to ensure that businesses work on this project, but actually that part of that legacy piece is really attacked and took full advantage of. And, in all honesty, from what we see from lots of other projects and lots of other opportunities, we can hand on heart say Sizewell's approach to this area of skills, and particularly legacy skills, has been very, very impressive from our perspective as a Chamber of Commerce in the way they've approached this. And I know Guy will touch on this a lot when he speaks, but the way in which Sizewell want to see maximum benefit for not only their project, but actually more widely for this region. So it is a great opportunity for you to understand that and understand what Sizewell's doing, but most importantly as well, then how you get involved as a business and the expectations that are going to be upon you. Now, as I mentioned earlier, questions and comments always key. So at the bottom of the screen, you will see the Q&A icon and you'll see the chat icon. Please put all of your questions into the Q&A box. If it is specifically to do with the subject matter that's being attacked today, then fantastic. If actually you've just got more broader questions to do with the project, please put them in the Q&A. We will answer every single question. And if we get inundated with them and we can't answer them all live, then we will make sure when we send out the information afterwards that we answer all questions we didn't get round to. But that interactive session is actually what this is about. It's about being able to ask the questions that you need from people like Sizewell or from ourselves. But also we've got the chat. And we always like everyone to introduce themselves and get involved. So please fill out the chat. Let us know what company you're from. And as always, as a Chamber of Commerce, we want to hear, don't just let us know what company you're from. Let us know if you're already working on the project. We want to hear from businesses, and we know there are already many tens, if not now hundreds of local and regional businesses working on this project today. So let us know if you're listening today, if you've already secured work on the project, if you're going through discussions at the moment, or if you're just simply interested in a way of getting yourself part of the Sizewell C project. And please add comments to anything that you hear from myself or from Guy, and we will always pick this stuff up and very much make it as interactive as we can today. The slides that you'll see today will all be sent out to everyone who registered. Probably by the end of this week, if not the early part of next week. So you'll have the information that you get today will be readily available to you. And of course, as always, we are recording these webinars. We host all of our support webinars on our website, and you can see them under the support tab on the Sizewell C Supply Chain.co.uk website. And they'll also soon be on the Compete For location website as well. So that therefore you can go back and look over them. Particularly that's prevalent for some of these areas that maybe as businesses who want to work on the project but are not yet engaged, actually you can listen to the information today, but then when you are engaged in the project, you can go back over and listen again. And that's been particularly helpful when we've discussed contracts, when we've discussed cybersecurity. And even on Tuesday of this week, we did a fantastic webinar that was all about the induction process and the process that you as a business go through to win a contract, but ultimately, should you be successful to win a contract, and the hurdles that you have to jump over before that first day working on site. So if any of you here today did get a chance to go watch that, that is now on our website. Please go view it and have a look. And again, I mean, that one, there was nearly an hour's worth of Q&A. So some really fantastic questions. So I will quickly, as we always like to, just give a brief overview of us, our role, and just to remind you of kind of where we fit. We have these 4 commitments. They are the same 4 commitments, themes, the same 4 themes that we have had since the start on this project, certainly when I joined it 3 years ago. And it is that, first of all, we need local. You know, we have been brought in for this purpose. Sizewell has made lots of commitments to use local and regional businesses. We're there to try and help make sure that happens, both by working with the project to identify what we can do locally, and by working then with local businesses to help them adapt and change their business to suit the opportunities going to be coming forward. So that's everything from local jobs and local skills. A lot of that will be discussed today, but also helping businesses work out who they need to be working with, who they can be working for, how they work together to maximize this opportunity. And as it shows on there, yes, we are the Suffolk Chamber of Commerce, but we are not just here for Suffolk. Suffolk is classed as local. The other 5 counties of the East are classed as regional. We're there to support all 6 counties. And also, you don't have to be a Chamber of Commerce member. We obviously love people who want to be members of our organisation, but actually it does not matter on this project. We will represent any business from any sector and help you understand this project. There has to be a legacy. You know, fundamentally, as the Chamber of Commerce, the reason we're involved in this project is to help influence and make the best for Suffolk that we possibly can. So yes, we want businesses to work on this project, but we want them to be fit for that future growth that's happening. So not just Sizewell, but other energy projects, other large-scale infrastructure projects, but also how we make it the most diverse and inclusive place in the country to work, and really try and ensure that the business community is playing its part across all aspects of social value, of corporate responsibility, but also just simply community cohesion. And importantly, you know, making sure it's sustainable and proportionate growth. What we don't want to see is businesses put all their eggs in the basket of Sizewell, try and take on far too much, and then either fail or miss a trick with other things. We want businesses to grow off the back of Sizewell, but that needs to be slowly, gradually, to ensure that once Sizewell is constructed in 10 to 12 years' time, that you as a business are still able to maintain that workforce, that infrastructure you've built, and take on plenty of other opportunities that are going to be available. And the final thing on this slide is the environment. Fundamentally, Sizewell C is critical to the UK's 2050 net zero agenda. So fantastic that we have this on our doorstep with B and C, but actually what can we do to support businesses to help their own net zero, carbon emissions, carbon-free future, that transition away from fossil fuels, and actually getting them into helping this project be even more carbon efficient and carbon negative. And of course, then finally, that commitment. You know, Sizewell have committed through various agreements to spend nearly £4.5 billion in our region. Now, that doesn't happen every day. And this is a massive, massive opportunity, because it's not just a commitment that they've kind of thrown out there. There's thought behind it. But as you'll hear today, there is lots of things going to be put in place to try and help that happen. But what also has to happen is local businesses step forward, be willing to change, be willing to get ready for this opportunity, because fundamentally this project has to be built, as I mentioned earlier, to do with the UK's 2050 agenda. And it's now being majority government owned, taxpayers' money. So it has to be on time, it has to be on budget. So to do that, businesses are going to have to get involved, understand, and that's where we can help you. But of course, there is that wider opportunity now of the nuclear supply chain across the UK, growing rapidly with other opportunities for other large-scale plants in the future. And so we want to see that 4.4 billion really taken advantage of. And the evidence from Hinkley Point C down in the southwest, which is Sizewell's sister project, which is now 60% or so of the way through, they released their socio-economic report in early April, and they're now at 5.3 billion spent in their region, which is a similar geography spread to what our region is. So the evidence from the southwest is that this isn't just words, this is meaning. And there is a great mixture of traditional SMEs from the Somerset region, mixed with also larger organisations that have moved into that region and are now sticking inward investment, bringing skills, bringing opportunity to people. So every bit of replication that is being done from Hinckley to Sizewell is going to benefit this project, and we would like to see that through the local supply chain as well, learning the lessons from them. A couple of other stats I will quickly just bring up to do with that Hinckley report. There are 3,800 businesses in the supply chain at Hinckley. So at some point, 3,800 businesses have been awarded contracts. That is massive, huge opportunity. Now that's from across the world. And they're somewhere in the region of 64-65% of the spend at Hinckley is UK businesses. So that is a massive, massive number of businesses of all shapes and sizes. And again, 3,800 businesses. At any given time, there are 20 to 22,000 people working on Hinckley. This is what Sizewell will bring, both through to the supply chain, but also through to people. And I don't want to steal too much of the thunder from the report, because I'm sure Guy will reference some of it. But some of the things, again, as a Chamber of Commerce that we're really very excited about is that right now, a third of the people trained at Hinckley come from the most deprived areas in the UK. And people often don't associate Suffolk with having areas of deprivation, but we know as particularly as Suffolk residents that we do have those areas that struggle. So a third of all those trained right now come from the most deprived areas in the UK is just mind-blowing. And what an opportunity Sizewell is to bring people into the workforce that then work at Sizewell and can work in your businesses. Fundamentally, how our role works fits within the social value framework that Sizewell has set up. Social value is critical on this project. It will be part of the scoring. It will be part of everything that happens through reporting for those businesses who win contracts. And that top hexagon you see there of increasing UK content is where we fit in. There is the mantra of local first with Sizewell. If it can't be local, it's regional. If it can't be regional, it's national. And that's why they have the aim of 70% UK content, but actually making sure that a good proportion, a higher proportion, is spent locally and regionally. And we're there to support that. And of course, there will be countless occasions that actually national or even international businesses are the ones who need to work at Sizewell. We won't have all of the businesses in this region that are able to, or the right size, shape, fit, capacity, capability-wise, to handle this project. But those organisations not local who come to work at Sizewell will be set the targets around social value to ensure that they are doing their own bit of local. So we will work with them to introduce you to bring local businesses in at tier 2, tier 3 or below to help really scale out that opportunity across every type of business. And of course, those other areas are where we support you. Most of those areas we have now done webinars on. We did a fantastic one, I think it was back in November, on biodiversity. We did one, we're doing the skills one today, for example. And I think one of the first ones we did in the autumn last year was all around tackling workforce inequality. That was looking particularly at gender and race, but there are loads of different areas we're going to work in. And really, that's where local businesses can add their value, because we're already delivering social value in Suffolk or in the region. And that's what the project needs to do. It doesn't just want to see social value delivered in the UK. It wants to see social value delivered as local as possible to the area that's most affected by Sizewell. And of course, we are, as I mentioned earlier, not just here for a Chamber of Commerce. Any group, any sector, any organisation that wants to understand and get involved in the supply chain at Sizewell, feed into us. We will feed you into Sizewell when it's appropriate to the right people. And it may be your feed bits into us. That means we host these webinars, do certain events, create environments where you can talk to the project. So any questions, any thoughts, please do always reach out to myself and the wider team. And we're there to help you and to ultimately help maximise this opportunity. And we do that by all these various different ways. And I know a lot of you on the call have had our team come out and speak to you. And we will now very much be working more in how we help you get ready for this project and the ways in which you can get ready in advance of the opportunities coming, be that around compliance, health and safety, standards, whatever it may be. But we are there for you. We are there for the project to help them feed down, and we are there for you to help feed up. And it's very much about you talking to us, engaging with us, and us trying to help you understand where you fit in this project, and importantly, when you fit. So at that point, I will stop talking and I will introduce Guy Hazelhurst from Sizewell C, who will take you through his slides.
Hi all, very nice to meet you. Just so you don't think I'm here 3 times, I've got 2 other colleagues on the call. A guy called Stuart Alsop, who's our job service lead, and a guy called Elliot Murphy, who's our skills lead. So you've not seen me 3 times. So I'm sure they'll interject if I say anything wrong or if you've got any questions that are relevant to them. But very nice to meet you. Next slide, please. So just a few things I want to talk to you about today. I'll whistle through them, but if you if you want to stop in the chat and go through them, then I'm sure Ashley will call it out. 5 key areas really. One is our approach to workforce development. We are the biggest construction project and engineering project in Europe when we get going, and the delivery of the project won't happen without a commitment to making sure that we've got the right workers in the right place at the right time with the right skills and the right competence. Hinckley's at peak at the moment. I think we're serving 60,000 meals a week right now. So that competence isn't just about construction engineering, it's about logistics, driving, welfare. It's just about every job that you can think of in terms of running the town. So in terms of that, what are our commitments to employment, skills and education? And I'll go through some of those. And what does our workforce actually look like? I think the key thing then is what do we do about skills planning, and what's your role in that, whether or not you're working for us directly as a tier 1, I see somebody with a contract directly with Sizewell C Co, or if you are part of a supply chain that is then feeding us. Hopefully there's some useful information in there that will help you see where you fit in all of this. And then I think one of the key things is that we need to fit within a regional skills structure, and we need to invest in that structure, because actually, you could argue that Sizewell C isn't ready. Sorry, the region isn't ready for us yet in terms of colleges, curriculum, courses, training. And for that reason, we've been here probably in this area for the longest with people like Ashley. I think we've been on the patch since about 2016, 2017, building those relationships with colleges, providers, the chamber, obviously, because one of the things is if you really are committed to getting local people onto your project, then getting local businesses to win work on your project is one of the best ways of doing it. So the partnership between skills and people and the chamber is really strong. So next slide, please, Ash. And next. So I'm not going to go through every single word on this screen, and obviously you'll have the slides to go through at your wish. But there are 4 main areas, and the reason for doing this. One, and it's particularly relevant when you're going through the planning stage, the investor stage, is that we are here to create economic benefit, both in the long-term generation of electricity from the power station, but actually during its build, and addressing some of the key national regional priorities that we have, and leave that sustainable legacy that Ash was talking about. It is a fact of life that you cannot build a major project now without creating wider benefit, hence the HPC example. And government as an investor and other investors are absolutely keen to ensure that we don't just stick to time, cost, quality, but we produce that economic benefit as a result of the project. But in doing that, we need to look at, and you could argue which way these bullets go, but minimizing workforce risk is absolutely key. In Hinckley and Sizewell, having 2 of the biggest projects of their type, not just in Europe, but in the world, means that you put a significant drain on the skills system, both regionally and nationally. And to mitigate that, we need to do something positive in terms of creating those right skills, right places, right time, growing that talent and that pipeline, because actually a stable workforce is what you need to deliver a project of this size. Being a force for good in the region in particular is something that we're absolutely wedded to, and we have specific commitments and some investments that I'll go through with you in a minute. And I think another key thing is, we're building 2 of these biggest projects at the same time, or at least they're overlapping. So how do we integrate Hinkley Point C with Sizewell C, make sure we're bringing over the lessons learned from HPC, particularly with regard to people, but we're also looking at the demobilization of one into the other, and how we make these 2 projects interact in the best way that we can. The stuff on the right I will go through with you during this presentation, but I think the point here is that you can't create and deliver on these priorities without creating some infrastructure, either in terms of education, employment outreach, pipeline development, apprentices, obviously. Coordinating what we need in the context of everything else is a really important one, because we're not the only big project in the East. I think there was a conference yesterday in Bury St Edmunds about national strategic infrastructure projects on our patch. There's about 15, more than any other region. So how do we, in terms of legacy, make sure that we can all work together as major projects and make sure that we all leave that legacy that we're talking about? So next slide, please, Ash. So this is just a way of showing that balance and how the two things go together. Managing workforce risk on the left, and they are significant. With churn in the industry at the moment on certain trades alone, if you think about steel fixing, for example, in civils, we think we need 900 to 1,200 steel fixers, but if churn is nearly 2 to 1 in the industry, finding 1,200 steel fixers is difficult enough, but finding 2,400 is even more difficult, and probably not possible. So balancing your workforce risk with what you're doing on the right-hand side, which is our commitments in planning to local and regional. If we create local people in roles on the project, the benefit of that, not just in terms of giving that benefit to local people and the employment that means in terms of people from disadvantaged backgrounds and things that Ash has talked about and all the things in the Hinckley report. But if we put somebody local in, it's a really significant contributor to minimizing workforce risks, because local workforces are stable workforces. They churn out less. You can progress them. You can develop them. You can move them within contracts and between contracts. And, and if we could fulfill 40,000 roles with 35,000 people because we're rebrokering 5,000 of them locally into the project, then actually, fulfilling our local and regional commitments is not nice to have. It actually balances and mitigates those workforce risks on the left. So skills is absolutely key. Next slide, please. So one of the things we do, and I'll go through this a bit later on with you, is skills is such an issue, particularly in relation to some of the main ones we have on our major alliance type contracts, whether it be civil works or mechanical, that we sit down with our supply chain and work out what those risks are. On the left, I'm not going to go through with you in great detail, but this is basically where we sit down and say, well, where are the risks in terms of key roles, in terms of demand versus availability? That's basically what that's showing on the left-hand side. And if you've got something which is in high demand but scarce to supply, then it goes into the top right of that risk matrix. And that means that we can work on those specific roles. We can use it in terms of driving curriculum in local colleges. We can get the interventions and the investment in place to try and make sure that those roles and competencies in the right-hand side there, top right-hand side, are minimized through being ahead of the wave and making sure the right mitigations are in place. And you will play, if you're part of the project, a key part in that, either as a tier 2 or as a tier 1 with us. On the right, there are the risks associated with big things happening at the same time. So on the right, just an example there of how the Sizewell civils workforce at the moment is looking at, it will interact with the Hinckley civils workforce, one demobilising, one mobilising. Obviously, we have to keep an eye on that, because if one extends, i.e. Hinckley, then that blue line goes to the right, might make it more difficult for us to resource Sizewell. So we keep a very weather eye on how our two projects are interacting in terms of workforce and demobilisation. Next one, please. So in order to sort of fill the gaps, and this is where we start to talk about bridging education and engagement and apprenticeships with the jobs that we have. This sort of lopsided bow tie probably helps to show what we're doing at certain points. The first thing is that we've, in order to sort of grow that pipeline, and I'll go through them in a minute, we have made considerable investments, and more than Hinckley, even when inflation is taken into account, on investing in skills in the region to grow the pipeline of people into work. And if you think that our future mechanical and electrical apprenticeships are probably in year 6 at the moment at primary school, not even secondary school, the need to reach back into education and reach more people than probably we need, because obviously at this point we're not asking them to work for us, but it's actually making people aware of the opportunities in the sector and in our area of work. So for that reason, our education program has started. It's been running for a couple of years as an educational outreach specialist and lead, something called Davina Bell. So we're already working very proactively, in the education area. And as you get closer to employment and working with people from disadvantaged backgrounds, we probably exclude as an industry, and I'm talking mainly construction engineering here now, 50 or 60% of the people who could work for us or have done traditionally, because either people don't see the industry as being attractive to them or welcoming to them. Obviously, I'm talking largely in construction about gender, but also disability, hard to reach groups. So, part of the left-hand side of this bow tie is reaching more people than we traditionally would, to show them the benefits of working with us and making and enabling their journey to work with us. And in the middle, where you see that recruitment bit of the bow tie, that's where our job service sits. That's where Stuart, who's on this call, sits, because we won't employ all the people in that pipeline, but as many of the ones that we can, that we put into our tier 1 and tier 2 jobs. We have a job service to enable us to do that and make sure we're pipelining as many local people into those vacancies as we possibly can. And as future employers at Sizewell C, that job service is open to you, I should say, and I'm sure we'll chip in the question and answer session or comments. That job service isn't just there for Sizewell C companies either. I think if there are local businesses who share the same demands as us, who share the same needs as us, then as part of our sort of commitment to minimising backfill and displacement, that job service will be available to you too. And then when you get on the project, which is the right-hand side of the bow tie, guess what? Skills continues, because a lot of the people you want to work on your project either need enhancements, don't necessarily have the skills that you need them to have. So they need top-ups, supervision, for example, those kind of things. So the whole skills pipeline goes round and round, and the investment in that is fed by both the investment in what we call DCO, which is the planning commitments that we have. I'll go through those in a minute, but also the really considerable investment that the project itself makes in enhancing the skills of the existing workforce when you're on. And we can talk about that in a minute. So next, please. So how do we go about this? Managing one of these projects from a workforce point of view can be quite challenging, and one of the best ways to do it probably is to eat the elephant one leg at a time, because you actually have 3 or 4 workforces over the lifetime of the project, and they're actually very different. I'll go through some of that in a minute. The first workforce that we have, supplemented of course by logistics, transport, welfare, travel, security, is the construction workforce, the civil engineering workforce. We've completed a strategy for that, which is available. We can share, but that sort of sets the tone, if you like, about what those investments need to be and where they are made. Next slide, please. And dovetailed into that strategy are some of the investments that we're making. At Hinckley, we invested 11.8 in total in 2012. At Sizewell, we're about 24.5, I think, so far, and that's a commitment to the region. That isn't the project-facing stuff, which I'll talk to you about in a minute. But to the region, we've made available a 12.8 million skills fund. It's got a horrible acronym. We call it the ASEC fund, but that is there to make sure that colleges, providers, university, and others are able to supply the skills that the project needs over the lifetime of the project. And at Sizewell, we've phased this to go with each of the strategies that I've just mentioned. So the civil strategy, there's a mechanical strategy, and there's a pre-operations and commissioning strategy. And at each of those phases, I'll show you in a minute, money is available to invest in the skills system. And it's available in the proportions I've just shown, but it's on this slide. But it's not an insignificant amount. And if I also say that it's not just there to fully fund, it's there to be leveraged against other funds. So the 11.8 million that we invested at Hinckley has generated an additional 40 million. So the total at Hinckley is now about 52 million in skills. So what we're hoping is that this 12.8 million will seed and enable lot of match, whether it be from government departments, industry trade bodies like skills bodies like CITB, ECITB, industry foundations, that kind of thing. So it's there to leverage other money and investment, not just the money that we're putting in. Next slide. In addition to that, because of that pipeline and that bow tie, we're putting 1.6 million into employment outreach, and that's there to deliver the sorts of benefits that Ash mentioned about where the workforce comes from, how we can serve and encourage people from disadvantaged groups, people who might be returning to work from ill health, people with disabilities. You know, how can we, but to get to those people, we need to invest in the outreach to those people. So there's 1.6 million in the pot to do that. There's 0.75 million as a starting point, which we didn't do at Hinkley. It was the lessons learned. So this is new for Sizewell, where we can actually support people on their route into work, whether it be help with childcare, travel to train, not travel on the train, but travel to train, those sorts of things. So we're actually sort of putting support in the hands of those that could work for us, but perhaps need some pre-employment support before they come. We're putting quite a bit of money in terms of the regional coordination piece, which links to legacy, because the one thing you do know about Sizewell is that we won't be building it, let's hope, in 14 years' time. So how do we coordinate what we're doing with what the region needs, and probably what you as businesses also need in that time, so that when we invest in skills, we're not just investing in what Sizewell needs, we're investing in what the region and the local supply chain needs. So we put some money into making sure that we're not just looking at us, we're looking at that broader regional legacy and what the investments need to be to support the region. And then on top of that, there's an education fund that deals with the people in year 6 who could be our future apprentices. And that's to supplement the activity that our teams already do. So that's $1 million of work to support collateral and materials, if you like, because we're employing staff to do that educational outreach already. And in job service, I've not put the figure on there, but we think it's about 5 million that we will put into running that job service that you can access, that local people can access, and will pipeline people into jobs. So in terms of skills infrastructure, and it's been a few years in the planning, you know, that is there and ready to go for you to dovetail into, but also for you to influence as well if you win work on the project. Next slide, please, Ash. Okay, so I'll pause for breath, just have a bit of a drink in this hot weather. So what does the workforce look like? This is indicative. It's not actual. That peak in the middle of the total workforce on the orange curve is about 7,900, 8,000 or so, we think, at Sizewell. But there are 4 workforces that sort of turn up in the phase of and they're all very different. One is the civils workforce. That is construction, but on a mega scale, and on a very sort of civil engineering biased scale. That will peak at around 4,000 to 5,000 people. And unusually for a project of this, well, any project, the MEH is just as big, the mechanical and electrical, that stands for, is just as big as the civils usually. You know, on most projects, civils projects don't have much of an MEH input, but of course what we're doing here is we're building one of the biggest examples of process plant in the world in a nuclear reactor, 80,000 welds on each reactor. So the mechanicals workforce effectively replaces the civils one and is just as big as the civils one. So in terms of in the planning, you know, you've got 2 different workforces that at peak are working on the project together, but then one effectively replaces the other. The purple line that peaks at about 1,200, 1,400 people is the workforce to run the town, and that's a really significant workforce. You can't do without it. You know, it's the security, the logistics, the welfare, the busing, the transport, the you know, everything you need to run the town, if you like, of a project of this size, when, you know, 8,000 people are being bussed there in 3/4 of an hour every morning and back in the evening. And then the red line is the future workforce for the operation of the plant, and actually starts probably earlier than you think, at the start of mechanicals. So our future workforce on the plant itself starts to work on the project at the start of MEH through pre-operations, commissioning, training, and all that kind of thing. So those are the workforce we need to plan for. Next slide, please, Ash. And you can just animate these away. Each of those workforces are represented here. There are different types of worker in each of those phases. I think the key point here, and if you want to animate away, Ash, is that we need to hit in advance of the wave the key things that we need. So, for example, if in mechanical, and that orange star is roughly where Hinckley is now, it's at that peak just beyond. So the orange star is probably slightly to the right of where it is in this diagram. But if you're really going to hit mechanicals and welding and other areas, you really need to be in there with colleges, with local people, about 3 or 4 years before, because if you haven't got your welding interventions in place before you start welding, then you're in trouble. And that was one of the lessons from HPC. And of course, with things like civils, we're already touching at that point where we need to get those interventions in place for the civil skills that we need, and some of that is happening in a very real way at the moment. Those strategies I was talking to you about, overlay that. So the first strategy, which is stage 1, has been written, as I said, but for each one of these major phases, we need a strategy to direct our attention and what we invest in. So hopefully that's just a useful slide as how we deal with all these different workforces in one go. I won't go through these, but some of the numbers are very significant. In civil engineering, that 650 in the top right quadrant, that's actually lifting people. So on this project, we've probably got the same amount of lifting as about 6 or 7 major cities, and that includes Birmingham. So things like tower cranes, mobile cranes, slinger signalers, lifting technicians, lifting supervisors. If you can't get a tower crane driver in Ipswich when we're building this, it'll be as much our problem as Ipswich's. So we need to make sure that with key areas like lifting, like that number down there, 1,200 steel fixers, which is the biggest quadrant in civils. When we started Hinckley, there were only 3,000 carded steel fixers in the UK, and we need 1,200 of them on Sizewell. So again, growing those locally, employing companies who employ steel fixers locally will really help us to keep that number down and reduce churn. The pie chart on the right is enabling works, which is not dissimilar to civils. It's actually probably the wrong way around. Should have put that one in first, but that's where your groundworks and your enabling works. That's the phase we're starting now. And then when we go one more on, please, Ash. Some of the numbers on here, particularly if you look at it in the context of regional supply, that in mechanical, that bottom right quadrant of 775, I think that's electricians. So again, we need to look at electrical provision. We need to look at what's happening with electricals, and we need to make sure that our backfill and displacement impact, particularly on electricals, when you've got everything going on in that area, locally and regionally, is really significant. The long-term roles on the right are the ones that are there in that purple graph that I showed you. The running the town graph. I think the significant thing about those, and that is your drivers, your welfare, the security, is that they are some of the longest jobs on the project in terms of your likelihood to be in them. So lots of opportunity if you come in security at the beginning, that you'll be in security at the end, but hopefully you might be a security supervisor in the middle and a security manager at the end. So we need to look at how we can use these roles to develop people while they're there. And also, I think one of the key things is that how do we rebroker people, and job service has a key role to play in this, between the different phases that are shown in these charts, because there's no reason if you're local you can't go from enabling into civils into mechanical, and we can retrain you, reskill you, rebroker you through job service, hopefully into one of your workforces if you're employing and you win work on the project. So next slide, please. So skills planning, how do we actually go about it? Next slide. Well, the first point is sort of stable labour market information or intelligence. try to use the word intelligence because we try and add a little bit of intelligence to the information that we get. But it's surprising how much labour market information isn't necessarily intelligently applied, but that's another story. We have something called the Employment Affairs Unit, and sorry for the acronym without it being explained, but the EAU stands for the Employment Affairs Unit. That's who I work for, it's who Stuart works for, and Elliot works for on the call. We have a role of coordinating all that information about workforce on the project. Most people on the project, including a lot of you on this call, I'm sure, see your workforces but don't see everybody else's, and you don't see who might be competing with you in terms of skills, availability, and jobs. So part of the role of the EAU is to somehow bring all this together so we see the big picture. So I said 1,200 steel fixers being a good case in point. I think the biggest employer of steel fixers has about 800, but there's 400 somewhere else. So, understanding how those contracts interact, the roles that they employ, how they demobilize and mobilize into each other is really important. So the EAU does that. We need that to be consistent. It needs to be externally useful so we can communicate it to colleges, people at the chamber, people like yourselves. And we base that on supply chain information. We do have a real advantage that we've built one of these now, or this phase of one before. Very rarely in construction do you get a prototype or anything in terms of major projects. So the fact that we do have literally a prototype in HPC is extremely useful to us in terms of lessons learned, understanding who turns up to build what and when, and what mitigations we need to put up in place. So, we're really keen on making sure that we have the right information we need to plan. Next one, please. The way we do it at the tier 1 level, so if you win a project with us at tier 1 level, but also at tier 2 level, if you win a project with a contract with one of our main alliances or main tier 1 suppliers, then there's something called an inclusion, diversity, employment and skills plan that has to be completed by every tier 1. But I think the reason it's worth reiterating is if you're a tier 2, you would be contributing to one of your tier 1's inclusion, diversity, employment and skills plans. At HPC, we call it an ESP. We've included inclusion, diversity in the acronym because actually, if we do want to create a stable workforce, we do have to reach people that the industry and Hinckley even perhaps has not reached as much as we aspire to. So inclusion and diversity really does drive the employment strategies at Sizewell C, partly because we need it, but partly because the investor base, particularly government, is absolutely insisting on it. And that links to the social value piece that Ashley was talking about. The social value expectations on Sizewell dwarf those of HPC in terms of reporting and monitoring and delivery. Hinckley does a brilliant job at it. And, having worked on Hinckley for a number of years, 6 or 7 years, I know the effort that goes in. But there are not the obligations on Hinckley that there are at Sizewell. The world's moved on, government has moved on as an investor, and absolutely wants to make sure that we're driving that inclusion and diversity agenda. The inclusion and diversity plan is there to address how I'll show you a slide in a minute, how you manage risk, but how you dovetail that risk in with interventions and planning. And if we get that plan right, and we communicate it at the program level, it uses forecast information, jobs creation information, skills pipeline information to drive the stuff on the right, whether it be onboarding, site delivery, skills interventions, and of course reporting. So the IDESP process, which is in contract, particularly if you're in tier 1 and the need to produce one, is really key to making sure that we're planning for the workforce that we need. Next slide, please, Ash. So the way we do that, it's quite simple. It's not rocket science. First of all tier 1s are asked to sort of forecast their workforce in terms of their need, in terms of competency and capability. We have standard ways of doing that. We've got competency qualifications matrices, which standardize, if you like, the description of the workforce. That means that we can compare apples with apples when we're adding people's forecasts together. But then within each contract, and this needs a really honest space. And I just want to reassure people now, there will be no penalty at Sizewell for saying that you're short of something in terms of workforce or skills, because we realise that there is a skill shortage out there. And part of the reason we're doing this and creating those criticality grids that I showed you is so that we can work with our supply chain to make sure that the skills needs of the project are addressed. When we ask you, have you got the welders you need to do this job, particularly if you're doing one of the bigger welding contracts, and you say no, as I say, there is no penalty for that, because the reality is I don't think anybody has got the numbers of welders we need right now to deliver the welds that we've got, those 80,000 welds. So it's not a supply chain capability question to trip you up. Have you got the skills you need? It's actually something that enables us to plan to make sure that the right skills interventions are in place. So therefore, having a gap analysis, understanding, where each of the tier ones are in terms of being able to resource their project with the workforce that they need is really important. Because when we've done that, and we've got a criticality grid for each tier one contract, we can start to bring them together and develop some targeted skills interventions and initiatives to grow that pipeline into work, to invest that 12.8 million that I've been talking to you about earlier on. So the plan drives the investment, drives the reporting, which is the last box on the right. And actually, reporting is sometimes more difficult than you think. So we need to look at how we do that. And because we're not now looking at how many apprentices you've got, it's how many apprentices you've got, from what kind of background, what sort of gender, so at what level. So workforce reporting is a nut that we nearly need to crack, and we're trying to make that easy for when you do get a contract for you to report those interventions back to us. So next slide, please. Okay, last leg now, and then we can break for questions and answers, or any chat that we might want. So the first of all is, what's that environment look like that we're delivering skills in? And it's actually very, very different than Hinckley. One of the things we've learned from Hinckley and Suffolk and Somerset is that Suffolk is not Somerset and Somerset is not Suffolk. And that might sound ridiculous, but actually it's just really clear to us that we can't just lift and shift the things that we've done at Hinckley and expect them to work at Sizewell. The location of site relative to Ipswich, relative to Lowestoft, relative to other supply chains and projects is very, very different. It couldn't be more different than it is at HPC. But what we have done is we've mapped and looked at where all the providers are, the colleges are, and started to develop relationships with them from a very early stage, probably about 2016, 2017. And this is a map of where that provision is. Next on the next slide, please, Ash. And with each of those providers, we've developed memoranda of understanding. So that's our directors variously with various college principals signing those MOUs. And I think it's a case of understanding, where the strengths are in the region, where colleges and other providers want to grow their provision, where their strengths are, because I think differentiation is really important. And of course, we do need to work with multiple colleges in the east, because in the west, this is really boiled down to one or two key providers, including Bridgwater and Taunton, because Bridgwater is on the doorstep of site. It's a big place relative to Leiston. A lot of people in the region get educated at Bridgwater and Taunton, but here, you've got by public transport, probably an hour and a half, 2 hours to get from where you live in Leiston to Lowestoft or Ipswich. So how we deliver training and skills in Suffolk is going to be quite a challenge, but we need to do that with all the colleges, because if you live in Ipswich, you're not going to go to Lowestoft for your course, and if you live in Lowestoft, you're not going to go to Ipswich for your course. So working with all the colleges and understanding how we're going to work with those colleges is really key. Happy to say we couldn't be in a more collaborative environment with them, and they're all working very closely together as well as with us. So it's a great environment in which to work, and those colleges and the university are falling over backwards to engage with the skills that Sizewell needs and the supply chain need. Next slide, please. So I won't go through this slide in great detail, but we are mapping where the strengths of each of the main college groups are and the provision is, so that when we make those investments, we're sort of directed at where those investments are probably best made. We're talking at the moment about where we put things like civil engineering centres, mechanical and electrical provision, all those things. So we're quite advanced in our discussions with the colleges, and we know who probably the best athletes are. But of course, at this point, we've not yet made those investments until we actually get the investment in the project. So next slide, please. And this is actually the last one. I think we've covered a lot there, from why workforce is important, what our commitments and investments regionally are, what our expectations are of contractors in terms of planning, and where we're at with our relationships with the skills system. I think one of the key things though is that you employ the people. EDF, Sizewell C Co don't. I think it's how we can engage you with this and hand over the baton. So supply chain collaboration is critical to enable us to deliver those ambitions on skills, education and employment, because they will be delivered by businesses like yourselves, not us. Our regional legacy and long-term ambition is something that we're all going to benefit from. As I mentioned, we've got to look at this from a regional development point of view, because there's no sustainability in just working for Sizewell on its own. We need to coordinate it in terms of broader regional and local supply and make the right investment decisions so we all benefit. And importantly, that we do mitigate any impact of backfill and displacement, which can be a real one, if we don't work together and invest in the right things. So your support on this call and engagement and insights is really useful. What works, what could be improved. The job service is operational. Stuart's on the call, is available to support supply chain roles now, is also available to support your businesses in recruiting now, and we might pick that up when I finally finish talking. And the last one is that skills investments are ready to be made. They are there now. We can start to plan for how we use them, and they will be all influenced by your input, either as tier 2s or tier 1s into those employment and skills plans, IDSPs that I mentioned. So there you go. Hope I've not exhausted you with that. Hope we covered everything, Ash, and open up for questions.
Brilliant. Thank you, Guy. It is a lot of information, and obviously, as you've seen from some of the slides, there's a lot of information within those slides, which is why we always want to share it. But I always say this whenever we've done any event where we've brought the skills or the EAU team along, is that actually it just helps businesses understand how seriously this subject is taken and how much work has been going on very quietly in the background with the colleges and countless other stakeholders to really address one of the biggest concerns we get from businesses is, how are you going to find the people? Or how are you going to prevent, can't prevent displacement, but it is going to happen. So how do you mitigate against it? How do you kind of build that pipeline, so to speak? So no, it's fantastic as always, Guy. There's a few questions and a few comments. I think one of the things I didn't say it earlier, but you talked about the excellence centres. And obviously it's good to know, that there is plans obviously for the excellence centres like there was at Hinckley to kind of build some over here. But 8,000 people have been trained out of those excellence centres according to that Hinckley report a few weeks ago. 8,000 people who are by their nature excellent, who are highly skilled at these areas that are critical to Sizewell, but then, or should say, were critical to Hinckley, which stands them in perfect stead for Sizewell. It stands them in perfect stead for something like Wilfer or wherever the next large-scale nuclear plant is. It'll help them when Lower Thames Crossing gets started and all other major projects. So by building these excellent centres in this region, it benefits Sizewell, but it benefits everyone. It's such a massive thing. It got referenced a couple of times. The job service is key. Stuart's been brought in for that reason. And I'd encourage any business on the call that kind of wants to engage with it, take a look at it. You can get in touch with the team there, because it's about building a very visible pipeline of work, of understanding. Because if Guy and his team and county council and everyone's going to look at what skills we need, but actually understanding where the jobs are that are out there is going to be key to that. And before I do a couple of questions, one other thing I'll say, Guy very early on spoke about how you'd kind of do a much more diverse reach out for a workforce. And we've seen some great examples through some of our other events. We did a webinar about 2 months ago with Davina, who Guy spoke about earlier from the Employment Affairs Unit, and Donna, who works in that team as well, alongside HMP Hoseley Bay. And also the Career Transitions Partnership. So very much looking at the ex-offenders route for employment, and also ex-forces route for employment. And, you know, we've got now about 1,800 businesses signed up to our portal. And I gave a very silly example, because I appreciate it is silly, but just for simplicity, if every single business signed up to our portal just engaged once with Hoseley Bay, just once, got one person at any level of employment, how that would literally, Hoseley Bay, that would transform everything they do about taking people off the path that they're on and give them a chance. And obviously, yes, some businesses struggle to take on one, some could take on 10. But it, just as that example, we've got 1,800 businesses who want to work at Sizewell. Well, how do we get those 1,800 businesses doing something that helps them win work at Sizewell, but actually just helps Suffolk? And that could be Hoseley Bay, that could be High Point, that could be Norwich. I mean, we've got so many options. And then when you look at the forces, we've got the US air bases, we've got the UK bases. Such huge opportunity to make a difference, I think. And it is about looking at things in a different way. And there, again, we can help on that if you want to reach out to these organisations, these charity and voluntary sectors, who maybe can help you find some of these people that can then enter into this skills pipeline that Guy's talked about. Then obviously we can very happily help you with that. Right, if I do a couple of the questions that are in the Q&A before I touch on the others that I've got noted down here. So first one from Sarah, have you worked with the local prison and probation services to look at potential people for the project? So Guy?
Yeah, well, links in with Hoseley Bay, doesn't it? So we're on the boards of the employer boards of Norwich, Halsey, I think a couple of others now, and both ex-offenders and currently serving offenders. You know, it's open doors as far as we're concerned. And it was interesting. I don't know if am I calling them out, but we were at local business called True Plant the other week, and True Plant said, "See that guy in the grab wagon over there? He's going back to Halsey tonight." And that is exactly, you know, the kind of opportunity that we want to create. And it might be, I only called it out because it might be surprising that a nuclear project with an emphasis on vetting the people who work for it, etc., are so open to that. I just think there's just a misunderstanding of what vetting is about, and it's not about, you know, whether you're an offender or not. So yes, very proactively involved, and in fact just had some emails about engaging with the driver and logistics day at Halsey at some point next week or the week after. So
yeah, correct.
So yes.
The links in are there, and again, we'll support and link you in. I know Miriam in particular and the team at Hoseley are desperate for businesses. You know, I find this actually with most of the voluntary sector organisations we deal with, full stop, whether it's to do with recruitment, whether it's to do with touching into young people to get them on the straight and narrow, maybe people not in education or employment, is that actually, you know, businesses hold such a power in this to help give that direction that they need to go in. So in the same way, loads of businesses do fantastic outreach in secondary schools, brilliant, carry that on, but there's lots of other routes to go down as well. I did it recently with one of the civils contractors working on site, who, rather than doing the traditional route of trying to find young apprentices to work in the offices, actually they went to one of the Suffolk-based charities who specifically deal with young people who have been excluded from school and completely gone off the wagon in life, and they bring them back and give them a bit of grounding and support them through that. So actually businesses, rather than just going recruiting someone straight out of school, now we're going through these voluntary organisations to find just the same people, but actually people that just want a chance. So there's lots of opportunities. And on your vetting point, Guy, you're right, because that was a point that Jackie made on Tuesday's webinar. Again, little plug why you should watch it. Is because exactly that. It doesn't matter if you're an ex-offender, you go through that vetting process. There may be extra checks involved on that individual, but ultimately it's not saying that someone who has previously gone wrong in life in some way can't work on a project like this.
Absolutely.
So we've got a question here. So we're looking to recruit in the local area, full-time business development now, and then an apprentice by September in customer service admin role. How are we best to go about this?
Sounds like an entree to Stuart to explain the job service and how to apply. I think very interested in the apprentice though, because it might match some of the ones that we're already doing on things like business administration, customer service that we're talking with the colleges about. So perhaps that's something we can take offline and help direct you towards on the apprentice. But I mean, Stuart, if you want to unmute, if you're on, would you want to explain how to engage with the job service?
This will be the test to see if he's still online.
Is he still online? That's the question. Well, if not,
well, there you go.
Oh, is he?
Well, while we're on that as well, then I was going to say, what in this example, Guy, what's the best route? So we've got businesses that maybe want to take advantage of some of the interventions you as a project are already putting in place. How best do they kind of get in touch to understand those? And maybe also just feed direct into the project some of the comments and concerns or feedback or best practices that they're doing. What's the best route for them?
So the best route, I mean, if it's around, and apologies that Stuart's obviously not online at the moment, but I think the best route, if you are thinking of recruiting, and it's interesting because if you win work on these projects, it's inevitably, because you're all busy organisations, obviously experience at Inkley, it inevitably results in employment creation within your businesses, and I think that's why the job service is there, why you can contact it directly. Stuart, I guess we will make Stuart's contacts details available. Ashley will be at the end of this call. So if it's about recruitment and indeed about apprentices, because all the apprentices get recruited for the job service. So if you're looking for an apprentice, we can direct you to them. So I think at the moment the job service, and it has recently been filtered by Stuart, has got about 700 people who said they want to work at Sizewell and be apprentices at Sizewell. So if you want to be put in touch with some of that talent, then Stuart is a great place to go and interact with that. If it's about the processes, more generally about the EAU expectations, anything that's come in this presentation that you want to know about, then I think either Elliot or myself would be the people to take those queries at the moment. As we staff up the various functions of the EAU. So if it's jobs and recruitment, Stuart, and if you've got jobs now, let's get them on the job service. If it's more broad, how's the project? How do you interact with the project in terms of workforce and skills? Me or Elliot?
Fantastic. And I'll share all the information on the job service when we send out the slides and the pack. We'll share some links to that and so on. And plus, you can see it if you go on our website, or also Sizewell C's website, there's links to the job service on there as well. Another question is, so the work done so far and the partnership formed is something we can see, is this something we can see detail on and start to build our thinking around? The amount of work done to date is exceptional. We need to quickly review and offer support solutions to that. So is there somewhere where someone can easily see everything you've been up to, Guy, outside, I suppose, of these slides?
Good question. We're putting there's that strategy that I mentioned. There's an early workforce information document that I think we should make available. We can make available as part of this. It tells you what workforce is coming when and what we're going to do about that. So the strategies, I think, are the best way of interacting with it. On top of that, we are summarising at the moment all of the areas of workforce management, which includes onboarding, mobilisation, employment and skills interventions, industrial relations even. So I think within a month or two, because at the moment that's a big weighty internal document, we're going to be creating some external versions of that, which we can maybe share with you as summaries or briefings, depending on what you're interested in, whether it's onboarding, mobilisation, industrial relations, inclusion, diversity. So expect a few outward facing bits on that. If of course you end up in the contract with us and we end up doing an IDSP with you, then all of that will become co-collaborated. We don't just ask people to do something, we sort of co-create things like IDSPs with you. So there'll be a lot of interaction and support on the way.
No, fantastic. And obviously those sorts of documents, when they do become public facing, again, we'll get them, we'll obviously share them through our website, Compete For, etc., as well as updates via our socials and newsletters as well. So we'll make sure when that information does become available that's relevant to the supply chain, we'll obviously share it out. Question just off of there. So obviously, because there's lots of training required, Guy, and obviously some from yourself, some will be more localized. Where you've then got local training providers who potentially can deliver some of this training, or maybe have skill sets that they've brought in from other projects. How do they get involved? And I suppose, well, the second part of the question I was asked there is how do we know what skills and levels are required and when? Well, that links to what you just said. But if you're a business locally that is a deliverer of training, how can they kind of get involved with some of that funding that's available and so on?
Yeah, so I think it's a really good question, particularly if you're a private training provider. And we know that the industry, particularly on the right-hand side of that bow tie, when you're talking about existing workforce skills enhancements, those sorts of things, that actually a lot of that isn't delivered by colleges, it's delivered by private training providers. I think in that sense, when it gets down to our alliances, a lot of that will be procured by the alliances, not by Sizewell C. So I think it's how and we talked about this only last week or the week before, and I think with you, Ashley, about how we introduce some sort of meet the buyer type events for private training providers with the people who need that provision. So a good example, most of the electrical provision at Hinckley is not delivered by colleges, it's delivered by a private training provider or providers from the southwest, because that's the way electrical training is best delivered for the existing workforce. So yeah, we will come up with ways of making sure that when training and training interventions are procured or needed that have relevance to the private training sector, and that includes plant, CPCS, electrical, that sort of stuff, that we'll make sure that when those procurements take place, that the private training providers regionally are put in touch with it through yourselves, Ash.
Fantastic. Yeah, I was probably flicking around on the screen, but just thought bring that bow tie back up again while we were just chatting. So, okay, no, that's excellent. Because again, we have lots of businesses engaged with us quite regularly as well, who quite regularly ask us these type of questions. So that's good. Other questions that are on there. We are already local and working with local colleges. How can we be joined up with Sizewell C team, the contractors, and delivering the social value initiatives, these colleges and local employment?
Yeah, really, really good question as well. I think we're forging links with the project with those colleges I just mentioned, and conscious that a lot of you are already on the patch. You probably work with those colleges probably longer in a more meaningful way than we have, because you'll have put apprentices through them, you'll have recruited through them. So I guess in that sense, our relationship with those colleges might not be as mature as some of yours on this call. So one of the things that we have created is something called the FE and HE Principals Forum around Sizewell, and linked to that, there's some thematic groups around employment, young people, and apprenticeships and skills. And I think it's docking you in with those and making sure that we're part of it as well. So in construction, there's the local and regional sort of building growth group, which I know a lot of people on the call in building might be part of. I think we also need to integrate with things like logistics, driving, and other areas probably better than we are. But I think we probably need to look to the colleges, and we're at an event that Alan Pease at Suffolk New College held the other week about industry collaboration. And of course, we were at that, but actually one of the great things about that is just about every other business that works with Suffolk New College in construction and civil engineering was also at that. So I think creating those forums of the colleges around those opportunities is really important. So no direct answer, but yeah, we just need to make sure.
No, it's making sure it's there, isn't it? And actually, this comes to the point I raised earlier about social value, is that it's quite a crass way to put it, but you're going to have the project itself, obviously will procure stuff, but also lots and lots of tier one contractors that are brought in, experts in their field, Hinkley experience, whatever it may be, that will need to deliver based on the fact that they're the best people to deliver that package of works. But as Guy said earlier, they will then have to deliver certain things around skills. They'll have to deliver certain things around ESG and social value. And that's where they will look and reach out to that tier 2 and below supply chain, because they need to use local businesses. So, they want to use local businesses. They need to in certain examples as well. And there's a desire to, for so many reasons, aside from the fact, like I say, you can just find people that are available. You affect your carbon emissions more if you use more local people, less vehicles on the road, so on and so forth. But actually, also, if you're then a local business that's already engaged with a college or engaged with a East Suffolk-based charity organisation, already doing some great works with schools and schools in the region, maybe already engaged with Hoseley Bay, for example, then you're a perfect fit for these larger organisations that are going to come and work at Sizewell. So it's the right thing to do anyway, is to work with colleges and other institutions. And our role will very much be to do that, how we link you as a business who's part of the supply chain, then with those businesses who are going to run these parts of the project, or the project itself for you to run a section. So, one of the reasons so many of the webinars we've done to date have been around the ESG subject matter is because as we're getting ready for Sizewell, we might not yet know when you're going to dig that hole or when you're going to build that wall or whatever it is. But what we do know, at some point, you're hopefully going to do it. So what can you be doing now? Well, what you can be doing now is tidying up your social value, tidying up your paperwork and your compliance and your standards, your policies and procedures, making sure that they're all in place and actually evidenced. Because then when that opportunity comes forward, you're not having to do all this other stuff. All this other stuff is done in advance and you're just in a better place as a business anyway. So we will help that introduction and ultimately help you if you want to do more social value with people, particularly in this region.
I should have said
with
sorry.
pressure.
I was just that regional skills coordination function I was talking about. I think we with the chamber need to make sure that stands up and does a really good job. I mean, we're funding it. I'm thinking things like welding forums and things like that, where we do get together and coordinate through that function, because that's a lesson from Hinkley. If you're going to do level 1, level 2 welding instructions, that benefits us all with an interest in welding. So you need to get your local employers together, and that's one of the reasons we funded that regional skills coordination function for. So I think one of the messages back to that, and that's run by the council, is that we need to stand that function up and start looking at how we can bring local supply chain together around key roles like might not be welding, driving, logistics, electricals, civils, and start to bring that coordination function into give it arms and legs and get it to work.
And coordinating it in a way that means you're not just replicating what already exists. Sometimes these things already exist and work. So it's just knitting into something that's already established that can give you the info you need quickly. So with all the pressure around workforce supply, have you looked at how to prevent and protect against modern slavery? What do you need and what you need from tier 1s, tier 2s, etc.?
Gosh, there's a question. I think it's yes is the answer to that. Whether we're one of the key vehicles, and we only signed them a couple of weeks ago, is the industrial agreements that we sign with our supply chain unions and ourselves. So we've got one for civils, one for mechanical, one for facilities and support, and a social covenant, importantly, and common framework that sits above all of those in terms of the standards and that we expect to be delivered to and for our workforce in terms of welfare, reward, pay, the way they're basically treated, and we're pretty proud of those 4 agreements. There's the civils one has obviously been signed first, so I should correct myself there. The mechanical and the is still in the drafting, but of course it learns from HPC. But they're really comprehensive agreements, and the common framework and the social covenants that we get everyone to sign up to around that, we're quite proud of, and think it sets sort of major project leading standards, because they take national agreements and build on them rather than try and sort of go light on them. So yeah, I'm sorry for the short answer, but yes, it's very important to us.
Okay, no, fantastic. Right, there's no other questions or comments. If anyone does want to chuck anything in through the last couple of minutes of the presentation, then please do, and I'll pick it up. It always interested me when you see, because I see some of these stats and stuff time after time, and you always see something different. I mean, nearly 800 electricians. I mean, that's a lot. And I think the key, again, for the project is they want these electricians, they need these electricians, but they can't afford for no electrical work to be done anywhere else. And when you consider what we're doing in offshore wind, Freeport East, uh, just people's homes and businesses and the growth that is happening along the A14 corridor, etc., it's huge opportunities for training and resource into this. And just some of the numbers are always huge. But thank you, Guy. I'll just do the last couple of slides. And like I say, if anyone does want to chuck anything else in the chats or questions, then please do. Just as a reminder to everyone and a prompt around Compete For. So many of you have known we've obviously run our portal for a number of years. About 18 months ago, Compete For was also set up. And Compete For is the portal where all opportunities will be posted for this project. Today alone, I think 3 have gone on, or if not 2 have, and the third's about to go on. Everything from e-bikes today. We're about to have batching plants go on there. We've had to build the concrete labs. So laboratories for concrete specifically built on site for the project. I mean, when we say businesses from all shapes, all sizes, all sectors, we literally mean it when you're going from e-bikes to labs for testing concrete. And these are all things that are needed. So every business we encourage, you may be signed up to our portal, fantastic, but you need to get signed up to Compete For. Very soon, we will be transferring across onto Compete For ourselves so that we have one portal for all information. And that process has begun at the moment of just getting Compete For set up. For that purpose. But all businesses should be signed up because then you understand what's happening and when it's happening. Soon there'll be a timeline on Compete For to tell you about what's coming over the horizon with regards to opportunities. And although most businesses probably on this call today and most who are signed up with us will never actually bid for work themselves on Compete For, it's important you're signed up because you see who is bidding. What is being bid for, and importantly then who is winning. Because then once you see who's winning work, you can then work with us to look at what they need and to see if you're part of their supply chain. So for broader awareness of these opportunities and where they're coming from, including events and project news and support and all the things that we do, it's vital businesses sign up to Compete For. Just like R1, it's completely free to sign up. There are, because it's a national portal, there's opportunities at HS2, there's opportunities at Heathrow Airport, and countless other large-scale national infrastructure projects. So actually, you never know what else you might pick up as well. But please do get signed up. When you get these slides, you've got to follow the links for how-to guides, etc. as well. But it is very, very important we get as many businesses as possible signed up to this portal. And as a wider plug for our future business support program, so as I said, we've done 2 this week, the top 2, which have been fantastic, and I thank Jackie on Tuesday and Guy for today for taking their time to present. Towards the end of this month, we're doing one on how to enter the nuclear sector and actually more broadly the energy sector. So we're doing that in conjunction with NSAN, so the Nuclear Skills Academy Network, who are going to talk about their programs which are coming up, but also West Suffolk College, who are the front face for a dedicated fund to support businesses in wanting to get into the energy sector and understand some of those areas that are particularly prevalent on large scale projects, be that compliance, training and development. So if you want to sign up for that, that's available to sign up now on our website. Please do, because it's going to be a great introduction into understanding some of the things that you might expect. Because I say, who knows what's going to come out of this? Working at Sizewell could change your business and you could end up working in the nuclear sector or the energy sector more broadly. So actually the funding and support that's available now could then lead you to great things in the future. There is other ones. We are currently planning a couple more in June, and we will continue our support program moving forward. As always, recording them, posting them on the website so they can be revised and revisited. And if there's other subject matters you'd like us to touch on, then as always, please reach out and let us know, and we will see what we can do. Stuart profusely apologises that he's having IT issues, but I will share his details to do with the job service when we send this out. There is no other questions or chat. So what we'll do is we'll give everyone a little bit of extra time back, which is always lovely when it's such a lovely sunny day. And I look forward to seeing you all at our next webinar or meeting you face-to-face at one of our next events. And we'll see you soon. Thank you very much.